All right, good evening. It's 7 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the community conversation that we intend to have this evening. The subject on dismantling hate and building respect and civility. This event is hosted by the Yavapai College Police Department and the Yavapai College Respect Campaign, and we're thrilled to have all of you here. My name is Gerald Monahan. I'm the Chief of Police here at Yavapai College, and I appreciate so many of you being in the audience. Before I introduce our facilitator tonight, Patricia, I'd love to call a dear friend and colleague, Becky Gunn from the Prescott chapter of the American Association of University Women, very strong supporter of Yavapai College.
Thank you. As he said, I am Becky Gunn, and I am the president of the branch, the local branch of the American Association of University Women. We chose to endorse this event because it coincides with our mission, which is to empower women and girls through education, through advocacy, and through research. Hate disempowers. It disempowers not only those who hate, but those toward whom the hate is directed. We live in a wonderfully diverse society, yet today we seem to often feel that we are very divided, and that division is corrosive. This event tonight is a way of starting to ease that corrosion through education and through dialogue. If we listen to each other, if we really hear each other, what we will see is that we're more alike than different, and that every person has good in them. Dialogue is critical, though, to this. It is critical to dismantling hate. And I do want to thank Yavapai College and particularly Chief Moynihan for sponsoring this event, because I think it is a start to dismantling hate. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. One of the things to mention about our Prescott chapter is that the largest AAUW chapter in the state of Arizona, and we're very proud of that. This event came about following the mass shooting that took place in El Paso at the Walmart store recently. The individual that committed that atrocity had written a very hate-filled manifesto. Now, our Respect campaign has been around for a couple of years now, but after that event, and we were hosting a school safety conference over the next couple of days anyway, we thought we would take advantage of having out-of-town guests and experts come in and be a part of this conversation that we thought to have this evening. And one of our guests that made the trip over here from Los Angeles, and I have the great honor of introducing Patricia McKenzie, and let me read just a couple of the projects that she's been involved in there in the Hollywood area. She starred as Dr. Lee in the TV series Departure. Dying for a Baby, a TV series for Hallmark, she played Dr. Davis with a Brooklyn accent. The Kindness of Strangers, a feature film, she played Claire, another doctor, with a standard American accent. Eat Wheaties, a feature film, comedy with Tony Hale. And Fallen Angels, a feature film, a gangster comedy where she played an angel undercover FBI agent. And one other thing about Patricia is she is a board member for the National Center for the Prevention of Community Violence. And even though she's very busy on her Hollywood and acting projects, she takes the time to serve in social injustice activities to help make a change in our world. So with that, please help me welcome Patricia McKenzie.
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you all for being here. I'm actually really excited to be here. I spent the day listening to some of the conferences, and I was really touched that that people care. So we're here to talk about hate today and what it means through different lenses of our panel of incredible experts who really, we're all really lucky to have these guys here today. And I'll just tell you briefly I was thinking about why I care. And I think I grew up feeling hate creates a lot of pain and suffering and different emotions. And in me, I grew up feeling very alone, and it created hate in myself. And I think hate is not a primary emotion, but a secondary emotion. And that secondary emotion, the emotion it comes from, is fear. So how do we combat hate? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. And we want your solutions, and we want your reactions, and we're going to hear a lot about it from the panel. I think some of the ways we can combat hate is through acceptance, through respect, through tolerance, and that can be of others and of ourselves. So I hope we can come to some really interesting conclusions tonight. I hope you're all going to give your input, because this really is an interactive session. I'm going to ask you all, in the spirit of finding an antidote to hate, to do a very quick exercise for me just before I introduce the panel. I'm going to ask you all in a moment to do something simple. You're just going to stand up. You're going to reach out to the person on either side of you or around the back. You're going to shake their hand, give them one compliment, something sincere, and tell them I'm glad you're here. And that goes for the panel as well, please. So if you would all do that now, just stand up, shake the hand of people on either side of you. You can walk down to them, give them a compliment, and tell them I'm glad you're here. And then reach around to someone else.
I'm happy.
The panel has a lot of self-congratulating to do. Thank you for indulging me in that. Right. So sometimes we think we can't make a difference, but little things make a difference, and little things like, just shaking someone's hand and telling them a compliment, or I'm glad you're here, or something like that, it can make a difference. So, I will introduce this incredible panel. First we have Chief Deputy David Rhodes of the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office, who is a 24-year veteran of the Sheriff's Office. This man, David Rhodes, is pretty incredible. He strongly supports the decriminalization of mental illness, which I think is so necessary and incredible. And he's going to be telling us tonight about the Reach Out project and his journey to decriminalizing mental illness and what that really means. So hopefully you all will have things to say on that subject as well. And do you want to just stand up just so people can see you in the back? So this is Chief Deputy David Rhodes. Next we have, please stand up, Mr. Tyran Payne, otherwise known as Ty, who is a police lieutenant with the Yavapai College Police Department. He is a certified active shooting response instructor, as well as a mental health instructor, with a wealth of information. There's so much more. He's received incredible awards: Medal of Valor Officer of the Year, Trauma Intervention Officer of the Year, Veteran of Foreign Wars Officer of the Year. So we're really grateful to have you here tonight. So many of you know Professor Brandlin Andres of the Art History Department. She's also currently working on her PhD and responsible for the conception and the posters of the Respect campaign that you may have seen around campus to promote equality, cultural intelligence, multiculturalism, and social justice. So great job, Brandlin Andres, thank you. Who do we have next? We have Mr. Michael Brady, who is Director of Security and Safety at the Embry-Riddle Prescott campus. He has a Master of Arts in Human Development, and he has a 40-year corporate career, also in safety and security, most of it. So we're grateful to have you here, Mr. Michael Brady. Our next panelist I've spent a lot of time with, who was also a speaker today. This is Mr. Bobby Kipper, who has 24 years of experience with the Newport News, Virginia Police Department, and is now a celebrated author and world-recognized expert on in safety and school community affairs. He has books on bullying, on gang reduction, on many, many topics, and actively caring for people, policing as well. So we can talk about policing with Bobby as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Stephanie Simbrick today also spoke and had so many enlightening things to say, so I'm eager for you to hear from her. She is a human trafficking instructor and has come all the way from Ottawa with the Ottawa Law Enforcement Academy, and has advocated for victims of sexual violence and domestic violence for almost 20 years, and has a lot to say on the subject. It's very eye-opening. That is our panel. I'm going to invite each of them, maybe in this order, to say a few words about what hate means through their lens and why they're here. And when we're done with the panel, we're going to open it all up to you guys. So, thank you. David Rhodes.
Good evening. Is this working? Can you hear me? Yes? Yes? Okay, there we go. Good evening. As Patricia said, my name is David Rhodes. I'm with the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. Been there a long time. And I want to talk to you a little bit about decriminalizing mental illness. That's what she brought. That's what she brought up. That's kind of my bag right now. Something that I've been working on. Something that a lot of people have been working on. And I certainly, there's a lot to be said about that. Who knows the difference between county jail and prison? Not you. Anybody else in here know the difference between county jail and prison? Tell me what it is.
Well, county jail, you go for a certain period of time, in prison, you're there longer.
That is true. That is true. Do you know why?
Well, I feel like county jail is where you either wait to get transferred over to prison, or you're there in holding for a little bit until you're bailed out, or until you say you have a 2-week sentence and then you run that out.
Exactly. County jail is where you go when you are initially arrested. So if you have committed a crime, the police come out, they talk to you, they arrest you, they take you to county jail. But when you're booked into county jail, you are not convicted of a crime. You are what they call a pretrial detainee, which means you still have all your civil rights, you have all of these different things. Now, if you get convicted and you get sentenced to prison time, then you go to prison. And that's where you're there for a very long time. So county jail, everybody that's arrested here in Yavapai County goes to one jail, the Yavapai County Jail. In 2013, I had spent about 18, 19 years in the law enforcement division of the Sheriff's Office. And I had come up and I became the the law enforcement commander. So I oversaw all the patrol deputies and all the narcotics people and all the investigators that we had. And the Sheriff Nasher, he said to me, hey, we're going to transfer you over and we're going to have you be the jail commander. We're going to have you be in charge of the jail, which is about 600 people incarcerated here in Yavapai County every single day. About 10,000 people get booked into that jail every year. And he said, when you get over there, we've got a real problem. We have a real problem. Half of the place is mentally ill people. They're substance dependent or they're mentally ill, and we don't know how to deal with them. We need another look at this. We need a fresh look. We need some new ideas. So I got over there and I started looking into the people that were incarcerated there. I started getting to know who they were, why they were there, how long that they were there, what their diagnosis was, what their charges were. When I started seeing some things, the first thing that I noticed right off the bat is that the staff, the detention officers, that they did not understand these people. You have 600 people in jail, and 300 to 400 of them are taking psychotropic medications, which means they're taking it because they've been diagnosed with a mental illness, and the medical staff are trying to get them stabilized. But they're acting out in all these ways that nobody really understands. Nobody can, they just don't get it. So I realized, we need to train. What do you think that breeds? That kind of confusion. You see behavior that you don't understand. It looks violent, or it looks unstable or out of control. How do you react to that? You react in a defensive way, like you're not sure what, these people are unpredictable. It breeds a lot of disrespect. It breeds a lot of stigmatization, and that's the term that you hear all the time, is the stigmatization of mental illness. So we started right in on training the staff, because those kind of things led to a lot of fights between the staff and the inmates. Staff are trying to get people to do things, they're not doing them, they can't hear them. We started training the staff. What does that mean? Well, mental health first aid, teaching them about mental illness, teaching them about things that will help them interact with people. We even got a device that you put on your ears, and it's voices in your head, and then we'll give you a bunch of commands, and then see if you can follow them while you've got all these other things going on in your ears. It's very interesting. But that wasn't enough. We had all these people in there. We realized, look, a lot of these people, if you are mentally ill or you're substance dependent, you're not getting out of jail at the same rate or at the same time that other people who are not. You don't have money. A lot of times you don't have resources, connection on the outside. You got homeless issues, transportation issues, income issues, all these things, and that all leads to recidivism. Recidivism is the term that you use for how often people come back, and you want to cut that down. But if you let people out and you haven't given them treatment, or you haven't connected them with any type of resource, what are the chances that they're not going to come back? Chances were very good that they're going to come back. So we realized, look, and the reason I asked the question about county jail is because a lot of people are there for like the first time they get booked, they get arrested, they might be there less than 24 hours. Not enough time to really diagnose them with a mental illness or do anything like that. So what we realized was we've got to screen people, we've got to connect every single person going out of the facility with a treatment, with a resource, with something that is going to help them not come back. And that means we had to hire a whole other discipline of staff, behavioral health workers, that work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to screen people, to identify them, to help them not come, to help connect them to treatment so that they didn't come back. And we ended up naming that project Reach Out. And it's named Reach Out basically because the staff is inside the facility and they're reaching out to the resources outside the jail that these people cannot reach out for themselves. And that's why we named it Reach Out. So this particular issue around decriminalizing mental illness, in my mind, is a civil rights issue, it's a moral issue, it is definitely a respect and civility issue. We're only getting started. The program that we're talking about now is becoming a model, and there's so many people at the sheriff's office, at the jail, that are working on this, that are a part of this, they're big believers. Chief Monahan, of course, we've got so many people involved in this, but it's becoming a model that other counties, other states have asked us to come and present and talk about because they see the value of it. You start talking about breaking down barriers, you start talking about breaking down walls, increasing understanding of people, meeting them where they're at, helping them connect to the types of things that are going to make their lives better, that are going to make public safety better. That's really what it's about. And so I just wanted to give you a brief overview of that. I'm glad to take any questions after the panel discusses. That's what Reach Out is about.
Thank you.
Wow, that's a foul. Go airplane move. Chief Rhodes is right. We have got to remove the stigma around mental illness. Hate just doesn't see color. Okay, so thank you for that, Chief. Appreciate that. Why am I here? I'll tell you why I'm here. I'm originally from Philadelphia, so if I start talking fast, I said this last night, please slow me down, okay? Because I will start talking fast as I get excited. Again, I'm originally from Philadelphia. I've been in Yavapai County for about 15 years. I've been a police officer in Yavapai County for the last 15 years. Hate to me is a very important topic. I'm one of only a handful of African-American police officers in this county. Again, I've been here 15 years. And in that 15 years, I have had the privilege of being the first that I know of black police officer for all three agencies I work for. That's Chino Valley PD, Prescott Valley PD, and here at the college. And it's what, about to go on 2020? You know what I'm saying? So, I have family back east, they're like, Ty, when they come to visit me, man, you still in Yavapai County? I only saw one black person when I was there. You know, so what are you doing? Why don't you go to Phoenix? You know, more diverse. And my response to them is, you know what? I don't know how many times I've been out on patrol, and I've had somebody of color come up to me and say, hey, I'm glad you're here. You know, and I'm sure you guys can understand that. It hits my heart, makes me feel good, because I love this community. I love this county, and that's why I won't leave it. I could easily go to Phoenix PD or, you know, Peoria or someplace down south, but I love Yavapai County, and I love this area, so that's why I stay. And it just makes me feel good to have African Americans that come here to visit, see me on patrol in uniform, and it gives them a little sense of security, okay? And again, that's not me making that up. I don't know how many times this happened in my career, okay? So, hey, yeah, it's a mindset shift for everyone, you know, to change the behavior. Would you guys believe that? Is that fair to say? Okay, change the mindset, change the behavior, correct? You can change behaviors all day, but you got to change that mindset. So yeah, hate is very near and dear to me. I've experienced hate both on and off duty. Yeah, I know you guys saying, wow, look how big you are. Who's going to challenge you? I know, it's okay, y'all can just go ahead and say that. But I have been challenged on duty. I've been called the N-word on duty. I made traffic stops and I've been told the only reason why you stopped me is because I'm white. Well, look at where we live. You know what I'm saying? If I don't stop white people, I'll stop no one. Okay? And I don't think my chief's going to appreciate that much. All right? So, and it's just a conversation. You know, it's a conversation that I have to have. You know, but I'm good with that. I don't mind conversations. I don't mind educational moments, you know. And before they leave that traffic stop, I'll let them know, you know, no, there's nothing to do with your race. You know, you were speeding, and that's why you got stopped, and that's why you got a ticket or a warning. Okay, so again, yes, hate is very near and dear to my heart. I enjoy law enforcement. I have enjoyed being a police officer in this county for the last 15 years. I'm not going anywhere. Again, and it's not just for the African Americans. I enjoy being here for anyone that likes to see a police officer of color in uniform on patrol. Again, it makes me feel good. So this is a very important topic tonight. I hope we get into some really good discussion, you guys. And thank you for being here. We appreciate you.
Hello, good evening. I'm a little bit of a different member of this panelist in that I think I'm one of the only people that actually doesn't have a law enforcement background. So the reason why I'm here is I am the chair of the Respect Campaign. So what happened was in the year 2016, a few years back, somebody incised on the elevator wall white power and a swastika on our campus. And that sort of sentiment has absolutely zero place at Yavapai College. And so what we decided to do is we decided to formulate a group of people, and these people are drawn from all facets of Yavapai College community. So this group consists of faculty, it consists of staff, and it consists of administrators and students as well. And what we do as a group is we try to really encourage this idea of being respectful to one another, treating one another with courtesy, and to really embracing this value of open-mindedness that we think should define who we are as a college. And so what we try to do is we try to encourage various activities from an instructional standpoint, but we do also believe that education can also happen outside of the classroom as well. So we try to host events such as these. We have the Common Read that's going on at this time as well, and other various activities. And so I'm on this panel to represent this campaign and to publicize it so that people are aware that this is what we have at our campus, and to encourage people to participate so that we together can change this culture. And that type of hatred that we saw, you know, graffitiing in our elevator is not something that will be repeated here on this campus again. Now, I can also say that I am on this panel set of panels as a historian. Many of you know me. I study ancient history, looking particularly at the objects produced by ancient cultures. And one of the things that I see as I study these works produced from 10, 20,000 years ago is this idea of similarity, right? This idea that the people who are making these objects, that they have the same hopes and same dreams and desires and fears, all the same things that we even today in 2019 have. And it always really strikes me at the universality of humanity, right? We're all the same. And it gets me really, really upset when I can see these tangible representations of similarity amongst people, but yet there is this insistence to divide, and I don't understand why. And so, you know, when I go into my classroom and I teach, and when I go into these meetings and lead the Respect campaign, it reinforces that desire to really set aside that hate, because it's pointless. It really is pointless. And so I appreciate this opportunity for us to come together and talk about this so that we can really advocate for, at least in our media environment, that this doesn't characterize who we are.
None of you are sitting in front, so I'm going to come to you. Comments made earlier about the idea that hate comes from fear. I think that makes an awful lot of sense. The fear can cause us to react differently to people. Fear can drive us to ourselves self-medicate, which creates problems. Mental health issues can scare people if you're not familiar with them, and cause discomfort. You know, who here doesn't know a family member or a friend who drank too much and became unpleasant or a nuisance? Who here knows someone who's on the autism spectrum, and some days it's difficult to interact with them effectively? Who here's known people or encountered people who have abused drugs for so long that it's actually changed the way their brain works, and you realize there's no coming back from that. And the challenge for us, I think, is that is how we choose to respond. Because it's very natural to respond with anger and defensiveness. When one of my officers interacts with a student who's having a really bad night, I want to be sure that they're going to respond with compassion rather than anger, rather than fear. But it's difficult to do. It takes training, it takes discussion, dialogue, it takes training in order to approach people with their best interests at heart and yours. The idea that we're all the same people, despite the color of our skin, despite where we come from, despite where we live, and that's been true over the ages, is a really helpful lesson for us. But the trick is to remember to find a way to work with a person. When I teach, I used to be an adjunct, I wouldn't stand in front of the class. I'd want to sit down and talk with people. So again, the idea that a person would sit down with you and talk rather than standing over you to talk is a lesson that's nice to remember. But again, just this idea of how do we reach out to people, engage in a dialogue, by being brave, by choosing not to be fearful or not letting your fear come out, and learn from that person. And we'll talk more about that tonight, I think.
This is an exciting evening for me personally and professionally. We traveled from the East Coast, as Patricia's traveled from California, as a united team to really talk about this critical issue of dismantling hate in America. I've been paying close attention to this for quite a while. And I started this nonprofit, the National Center for Prevention of Community Violence, about 10 years ago. And it was started on several concepts that we think are very important. There are a couple things I always like to tell groups when we're talking. The first thing is that we've got to understand that violence and aggression is not an event, it's a process. Hate is not an event, it's a process. It doesn't just happen automatically. There's something that engages all of us to have that mindset of hate. And so when you look at interrupting that process, which we need to do on a national level to start out with, we can only make inroads in where we are as a society if we change our narrative. We have got to change the narrative in the United States away from discord and hate, and we need to focus back on acts of kindness and what communities can do to be supportive of one another. And without that happening, the narrative is driving us to a position, I believe, in America to only look for the worst in people. And I think that that's got to shift. The other thing that we believe very strongly in, we believe very strongly that culture sets climate. Let me tell you what that means. And you mentioned culture, Professor. I'm glad you did. Because what that means is what we allow to happen over and over and over again is simply what we become. Whether it's a community, whether it's a college, whether it's a business, whether it's a government agency, what we allow to happen becomes our identity. And right now, how many of you would agree that our identity is not very positive? If you agree with that, raise your hand. We can shift that, folks. That's why we're here to talk about this. We have to dialogue together about how to shift it. A couple more things that really impact me personally when I think of hate. There was a gentleman that led the civil rights movement for years, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Martin Luther King. And Dr. King said a lot of things that we need to pay attention to, and we need to pay more attention to. He had a speech in Washington, D.C., and when he stood up, he had a speech that was called what? Can we say it together? I have a what? Say it together. I have a dream. I'd like to find our dreamers. That's my goal, and our organization's goal, to find our dreamers. But there's an intriguing thing about Dr. King that's important. What was his occupation? He was a pastor. He was the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. But on that mall that day, everybody translated his speech to deal directly with race. And when you hear people talk about Dr. King and his legacy, it's all about race. But let me give you another definition of what he really was talking about at one point. In that speech, he basically said, I have a dream where my son and daughter will grow up in a community where they're not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to address hate in America, in order to change the narrative that we face, which is very negative, we do not have to just focus on race, but more importantly, we need to focus on character. Because that's where it starts, that's where it begins, and in my estimation of research and study, it's all about behaviorism and behavioral science, and that's what we need to focus on. We need to focus on the fact, I love this, what we're talking about, not criminalizing mental health. You know, when we look at this and we want to find solutions, I feel like sometimes we're at the Scarecrow at the Wizard of Oz and looking for the yellow brick road. Does anybody remember that scene where it's like this? But what happens to us is we fail to really find the yellow brick road by basically doing this. Michael Jackson has a landmark song that I always lean to when we talk about dysfunction and hate in our world. And he said the following statements. He said, I'm looking for the man in the mirror, and I'm asking him to change his ways. And at the end of it, he says, if you want to make the world a brighter place, you need to look at yourself and make a change. This is about a national narrative, in my estimation, as the director of a national organization and author, that has to shift, and it has to shift sooner than later. Thanks for having me.
So, in case you've forgotten by now, since they saved the best for last, I've been working with victims of crime for 20 years. Okay, I started out in the seat that you're sitting in. I was a college student. I procrastinated my internship, and my professor was like, hey, you should probably do your internship at this domestic abuse shelter. They didn't have a shelter yet. We were in the process of building the first one ever in Northeast Iowa, and I literally thought, because I applied for a job once my internship was done, I thought, I'm gonna just take this until I find a real job. Like, that to me wasn't even a thing I would do forever, and here I am, right? Because I have the privilege, through every role that I've ever had, of being a voice for victims of crime, meaning dating violence, domestic violence, sex abuse, sex trafficking, labor trafficking. They do not have a voice. Am I cutting out? They do not have a voice, okay? And I find a lot of satisfaction in speaking to groups about the power that we have as a community to come together to end the hate for victims of crime. If you want to see an example of hate, Google any article about sex abuse. What are the comments going to say? Right, she asked for it. They're not positive, right? None of them are ever positive. I probably should have given this group the same disclaimer that I gave this morning, right? I am not mad, I promise. I'm just very passionate. We do not make an environment conducive of reporting crime. And then we wonder why people stay or they don't report. And so I think it's really super important for us to understand what the issues are. So if you don't know about these topics, I'm sure that the police department can organize that. Hi. The power that you guys have, because we all have a part in this, right? I am fortunate to get to train medical staff, law enforcement, our local community advocates, in how to take reports to these crimes. But you guys are the key to this. Our community involvement, our bystander intervention is super important here. The good news is most people are good people. Most people are good people. We have a small number of people who are out committing a large number of these crimes. Okay, and people, contrary to popular belief, are not making this stuff up, right? We like to accuse people of false reports and all that type of stuff. Most of us are good people. If you see something happening, you have to say something. And so hopefully you guys have some good bystander intervention training on the campus that you can participate in or learn about too. But you guys have a voice. You are the voice. Not only in this setting, but you may be on a jury someday, right? Where we're trying to hold offenders accountable. And our lack of our fear, I love that earlier because we are so afraid of the fear. The fear that we have, the information that we need in order to create an environment that is respectful and conducive of reporting, it can happen. And we want to, until it does happen, we aren't able to hold offenders accountable. So I encourage you guys to just think about your role, what you know about these crimes, and how you might be able to help, not only help dismantle some of that culture, but really support the people that might be coming to you for help, because statistically speaking, people are going to come to you guys before they come to the professionals. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, panel. So some of the common themes that I think we've been hearing from the panel on the subject of hate is mental health, that's a big issue, fear, reactionary response, having no voice, victim blaming. And I told you earlier what hate meant to me was that I felt alone. And to give you a little bit about my background, I grew up in a white community. I'm half black, half white, but I look black, so for all intents and purposes I was black. I'm French and English, so I never fit in. I always felt alone. And that not feeling of belonging anywhere, even within my own family. My family's white, my community was white, everyone's white. My school was English and I spoke French. So I always felt like I'm not quite fitting, the piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit. So for me it looked like depression, anxiety, overworking, filling that void with overachieving, which may not be a bad thing, but it actually ended up leading to a complete burnout. That's what hate looked like for me. I internalized it, and some people say depression is anger turned inwards. For other people, depression is anger turned outwards, it can be as well. And I'd like to ask you all now, what does hate mean to you? How do you see it? How does it manifest itself in your reality? So that's for the audience. Tick-tock. Not everyone at once. Go ahead.
Fear.
Fear. And how have you seen that as fear in your existence?
People react to what we've been seeing. They react harshly to. They react harshly to what they don't know, and they, instead of internalizing or realizing they feel fearful, they turn hateful instead.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think often in the panel can talk more about this. When we fear something, it's easier to hate it than to, would you agree, than to what would be the opposite of just hating something. What would you do if you feared something? Anyone? Yes.
You ignore the person, you shun them, and you ignore the person, you shun them, or you can kind of talk bad about them and get other people to ignore them, and just that can harm the person because then they feel rejected, you know, and that hurts.
And I don't know your entire mental health background, but what does ignoring a person do to them?
Well, it's a barrier. It's a barrier that goes up. It's standing up again. Yeah, you know, ignoring people builds walls. I mean, that decreases understanding. It doesn't increase. I'll take a minute and give you an example. At the jail, and this is true pretty much everywhere, there's a system that you put people in their cells. It's called classification. And the classification is usually determined by somebody's behavior. So how they're acting at the jail determines on which dorm, which cell they get to be in. Mentally ill people, oftentimes, when they get to the jail, they're in the middle of some type of breakdown or psychosis or something, and they're acting out. And so they get classified as house alone, so they're locked into a cell by themselves because nobody feels like they can be controlled or their behavior is unpredictable and it's scary and difficult to manage, so it's easier to put them away. And that's not, you know, in the moment when you need to keep people safe, that's not a bad thing. You know, it needs to happen, it's necessary. But what happens in the jail a lot of times is that classification never changes. So you stay housed alone forever, even after maybe you're taking medication, or you've been seeing a therapist or something, and you're no longer acting that way, and you've got your wits back about you, or your mental faculties back about you, but you're still by yourself in this cell. Well, socialization is like one of the main things that people have to thrive, to live, to recover, to stay mentally stable. So we recognized that early on. We got over there, and I said, look, we're going to create a mental health unit. We're going to get these people out of house alone status. We're going to put them all together, and we're going to put and we're going to sit in there with them, direct supervision. So an officer, a detention officer, sitting in there with the people that are locked up, like I'm in here with you, like right now in a room like this. So we had this idea. I said it was my idea. What do you think the staff said about that when we wanted to do that? They were like, they're like, you're crazy. They're like, you're nuts. We're not going in there, and we're not going to sit with these people that have acted like that in one time. And I'm like, look, you just need to get to know them, and once you do that, and they get to know you, and they trust you, and then you can trust them, this can all work out, and their behavior will be better, their recovery will be better, their prospects of getting out and not coming back will be better, but we got to trust that this is possible. And there were people who said, even people in the command staff at other agencies, they're like, you know, you're going to cause a riot. Like, these people are going to fight, and all this stuff is going to happen. So we asked, you know, I asked around. The jail's a huge business. You know, you've got 200 and something people that work there, $20 million a year. And so I can't be the one that's in there doing this. I needed a strong leader that would be willing to take his on. So I found one. He was reluctant, but he did it. And he went in there and he basically, he took the mental health unit, started bringing people out, started getting to know them, got everybody in the jail that met that classification into one dorm, got them out every day together for programs, for all these different things. We've gotten hundreds of letters from people who were in that, who were in the mental health unit later after they got out, talking about their experience. Well, once the rest of the staff saw that that they were wrong about what they thought about people with illness or how it was going to go or whatnot. We only ever had one fight in there, knock on wood, it's been going for 4 years. We've only had one fight ever in the mental health unit. So that, once the rest of the staff saw that, once other people saw that they were wrong, that their initial fears were incorrect, and that they misperceived, and that they based those things on things that were not reality, and they had a greater understanding of what reality was, their lack of respect or hate for mentally ill people was eliminated. And that was one example of an experience that we had at the jail, where I literally saw hate, disrespect evaporate in one little group of people, just because of that. So that was an example that I'm glad I had an opportunity to share that.
That's very powerful. So an antidote for hate in that instance is what? Based on what was just said. Anyone? Sorry? Understanding. Exactly. Some understanding, compassion, respect. Just by show of hands, how many of you have any mental health people that you deal with, mental health issues or anything, either yourself or someone else? Just by show of hands to get an idea in the audience. So, would you say about 70%? Yeah? About 70% of you. Tyran, would you mind, as a mental health crisis interventionist, maybe giving us some tips about what we can do? Because I think it affects, if it doesn't affect anyone you know, you probably don't know what everyone you know is going through. Because people hide it well. And so if someone we know, or if we are going through a mental health crisis, what do we do to help them or help ourselves?
Yes, ma'am. So, listening non-judgmentally, okay? That's very important. We all have our biases, but if you're dealing with someone with mental illness, try to be non-judgmental, okay? Be understanding of what they could be going through. Because, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but 0.3 to 0.7% of American adults suffer annually from schizophrenia. 2.8% of American adults suffer annually from bipolar disorder. Who can tell me what psychosis is? Anyone? Bueller?
Over here.
Where we at? What you got?
Over here in an altered mental state where there's a disconnect between you and how you see reality. So reality is no longer real.
That's correct. Reality is no longer real. Okay? So, and bipolar disorder, if this goes untreated, it doesn't get better. Okay? You've got to seek medical attention for that. So, someone that is in a mental health crisis, listening non-judgmentally is very important. Okay? Getting them to effective, immediate care is also necessary. okay? Effective, immediate care, okay? We've got agencies in this county, Teros, Spectrum, and we're also pushing mental health first aid response training to agencies, schools, which is very important, okay? Here at the college, our RAs are all certified. RPD is 100% certified. And we're working on all the staff to be certified mental health first aid responders, okay? So we are taking it seriously. And this is a push that was initially leading the charge by the Sheriff's Department, okay? We jumped on board with this because it's very important. Removing that stigma around mental health incidents and issues is very important. Being able to be a resource to someone that's in crisis is very important, okay? So, non-judgmental, getting into effective, fast care is very important, okay? And listening. Sometimes it's okay for you to be, lack of a better word, shut up and just listen and let them talk, okay? You're there to help them. So sometimes you have to let people that are suffering from mental illness take the stage, okay? They can probably help you assist them with what they're going through, okay? We're so fast to jump because we want to help, but sometimes we have to be quiet and just listen, okay? So those are just some tips as far as to what we can do as a community to help someone suffering from mental illness or in mental health crisis, okay? Get the numbers, and also keep in mind that some of these mental illnesses could be co-occurring, okay? Could you imagine suffering from bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, trying to live or exist, carry on a healthy relationship, go to school, go to work, how exhausting that would be? Very exhausting. So again, listening non-judgmentally and being understanding is very important when someone is in crisis. Okay?
I'm glad you said that about listening and compassion. I'd like to share a quick little story. When I was going through the worst of my depression, I was on the street, and as I was going through this depression, I realized that for the first time in my life, I couldn't control everything. I couldn't control my thoughts. I couldn't even control my physical body. So on this day, I was able to get out of bed and walk, and I saw this woman across the street, and she was screaming just obscenities. You know how some people do. It was before cell phones, so you didn't have a Bluetooth in her ear. It was just her. And normally, that kind of person, I would be fearful of and turn away from and have no interaction with, that's for sure. Anyways, this particular woman, it's a busy road, and I'm in Montreal. She's screaming across the street, and something in me just opened up with an incredible amount of compassion, because I thought, that woman is going through something like I'm going through, where she's not in control. And I just looked at her, and I was listening with my soul, maybe. And the woman came up to me, still screaming. Now by this time, we're both crossing the street. We're in the middle of the road. She comes up to my nose. The moment we're face to face, she stopped screaming, and she just whispered, "Thank you." And then she walked off very quietly. And that moment blew my mind, because I had almost missed an opportunity to see another human being, to have compassion, to realize that people are going through things that you can't see. And instead, I got this incredible gift of this person in there that was fighting to just be a person and doing everything she could, but couldn't control it. So when you mentioned listening and compassion and respect, and as of some of you have mentioned, I think it's so important to remove the stigma, as you mentioned as well, Ty. Did you have something? Jump in. Yeah.
And also, it's a hard conversation, right? Is that fair to say, you guys? Someone in mental health crisis is a hard conversation to have, especially with a stranger, right? But the worst thing you can do is ignore it. If you don't want to have the conversation, pull someone else into the conversation that might be willing to have that conversation, get this person the help they need, okay? We can't ignore this stuff. It's not going away, you know? And people that are in mental health crisis, I mean, they're here, you know, they're not going anywhere. So the best thing we can do is not ignore it and try and be a resource. And if you don't know, reach out to me. We're going to start hosting mental health first aid response classes here at the college a little more often, open to the public, okay? So we will get you, hopefully, the knowledge that you need to be a resource in your daily lives.
And because of the stigma, sometimes a person with mental health doesn't want to acknowledge that they have a mental health issue. So what do we do with a friend or a family member who doesn't want us to mention that they have a mental health issue when it's clear to everybody else?
I'm back. Again, it's a hard conversation, even with family, it can be. Just to take it personal for myself, my mother, before she completed suicide, suffered from mental illness, okay? We didn't find this out until after she completed suicide, all right? But she suffered from a number of different psychosis, okay? And the conversation was hard. She's a black woman from Philly, so you know how hard, maybe you don't know, and I'm not gonna tell you, but she was a very strong woman, okay? So it was hard to steer her in any direction she didn't want to go, okay? But you can't be afraid to have those conversations, and I wasn't afraid to have those conversations, but I also knew when to remove myself and allow professionals to come in and take over. You have to do the same thing, okay? If you're having a conversation with a family member or a friend or someone and you realize that you're in over your head, then call in someone that maybe can take over for you, okay? Is that fair to say, you guys?
Does anyone have any questions about this particular topic or something you're struggling with or don't know how to help someone? Yes?
Not a question, more a comment that one of the things I didn't hear mentioned at all was the concept of patience. That sometimes you can do everything right, but it's not about doing it right once. It's about being there consistently and understanding that a person, even once they're better, can have fallbacks.
That's a beautiful point and very well put. Thank you. Anyone else? Things we've missed or things you want to share? Things you're struggling with? Or on the panel?
Sometimes it's hard to understand dealing with the mentally ill family members. Sometimes it's hard to understand why they do things they do. I appreciate that. So, my mother passed away a year ago, and she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and she did a lot of stuff that, doesn't make any sense, and we never understood as a family why she would do the things she did, and my family can be very judgmental, and I don't think they fully understood her mental illness as something other than just, oh, she's just going through things, she's just moody, stuff like that. They didn't really take full time to understand, and she didn't really have the full support she got, so I feel like it was hard for her to express and justify her actions to us because we just didn't take the time to understand her before she died.
Do you have a different view of it now?
Yeah, I do. And I wasn't raised by her either, so I feel like that's also why I didn't fully understand it, because I grew up in an environment where if you were super emotional, it was like, suck it up. So we really, as a family, we really don't ever express ourselves, and we don't really talk about these things, but with her being gone now, I have a different, more, I don't know how to describe it. I have a different perspective on how I view some of the stuff that she did in her passing.
Is there anything that would have helped her and your family to deal with that situation?
Honestly, I don't think so. Because at this point, with her being gone for a year, it's kind of made me realize that if there was something that we could have done, we could have done it. But now, my family, now we talk about it more, now we're more open with each other, now we come together, we sit and really have this conversation of what could we have done better. But at that time, no, she hit a full psychosis before she died. There was nothing we could do. The doctors even said there was nothing we could do.
So what can we do as a society because when a person has mental illness, it's not just the person suffering, it's the family, right? You guys were taken along for the ride. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah.
So what can we do as a society to help each other, help the person who's ill, and help the family and friends who have to be patient, who have to manage it, who have to hold their tongue, who have to intervene? What can we do? Any ideas? Yeah?
I don't think people realize how much it means for, oh, thank you. I figured I was loud enough. I don't think people realize how much it means to just sit and talk, I work in the behavioral health field doing group therapy, And sometimes all you need is just like, can I listen? You know, can I empathize with you? And as most people think it would be like quite often, it doesn't, people don't even want to offer their time, you know, half the time to just converse and just say like, hey, are you okay? Like, you good? You know, people don't do that. And that's, I think, the complaint that I get the most from people, you know, that nobody really cares.
Sometimes people wait until someone's committed suicide, for example, to say, oh, why didn't they just reach out?
And this happened,
Well, maybe they were reaching out.
well, and this happened recently. I lost someone to an overdose a few weeks ago, and then all my friends started reaching out, and then they were all like, oh, well, we should hang out because someone died. And that's not how it's supposed to be, you know, that we're not supposed to connect after someone dies, it's supposed to be before.
So what should we do before?
I mean, there's so much to do before, you know, and that we just don't, like I said, we can converse. I mean, I think, you mentioned something about, you know, the stigmatization of mental illness, and I discuss that a lot, where I think it needs, like, more people need to just, like, talk about it. More people just need to be okay, and I don't know in what sense, but just okay with the fact that, you know, mental illness is essentially, like, invisible illness is the same thing as cancer. You know, everyone thinks of invisible illness as this big, scary thing, where a personality disorder is just the same thing as having a physical illness. You know, it's not a scary word.
That's a very good point. I mean, all of your points were great, thank you. So why is there a stigma? Just to stay on mental illness for a little bit longer.
I would say it's out of lack of knowledge on the subject, fear because we don't understand it, because we're not feeling it themselves. And of course, when a bunch of people start feeling afraid and start bringing it up, like bringing up the stigma, and other people start going along with it because they don't understand it either. So they're grasping on to whatever society is telling them. And I remember growing up in a family that was like that, to where they, like her family didn't really talk about feelings. We kind of suppressed them, which results in mental illness, of course. And I remember being told over and over, even as a kid, that suicide was the coward's way out. And that's what I thought too. Like, my family shunned and shamed people who committed suicide. Like, oh, if they committed suicide, they deserved to go. They were too cowardly to be living. And it wasn't until suicide had become an option for myself that I started to understand that that's not how it is. That mental illness is much deeper than that. It's a much deeper seed that takes a deep root, roots itself, and grows and grabs you until you can no longer control it. And sometimes it takes somebody else to take the buzzsaw to cut it down. And sometimes even that won't work because it just grows back like a weed. So it's just a lack of understanding. And people need to be more open-minded to learning about it. Let go of whatever they think they know about mental illness. Start fresh, learn more about it, and don't judge right off the bat. Try to understand the people that are suffering.
Thank you for sharing that. It sounds like your views evolve, and sometimes when someone has a mental illness, there can be a lot of self-loathing. There can be a lot of, why, you know, snap out of it, why me? Which is the most dangerous thing, because then it does lead to a loss of hope, and when you have a loss of hope, you have no way out, and then you get the suicidal thoughts. And I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad you're here. I'm grateful for you, and thank you for sharing that. Yes?
The thing with mental health and suicide and bipolar disorder and schizophrenia is with society today, with your normal people in there, they don't have access to the the cure, not the cure, but the control, because it's like diabetes. You don't cure it. You can have medication, and you can have group therapy, or you can have therapy with a doctor, but it's not financially available to them, and they go on with their life and don't have the knowledge that it takes to understand that suicide is a mental illness, and it can be controlled with medication, and it can be controlled with therapy, and it's something that it's an illness. It's not, you know, a way out. You're just, you know, it's an illness, like bipolar disorder is an illness, and it can be controlled with medication. It can be guided with therapy, and the finances are something that we don't have in society today to control the person who's in jail. When he gets out, is he going to have the money to be able to get the medication that he's been given to when he's in jail or in prison? You know, when he gets out, is that going to be available to him?
That's a very important point, and I'd love to ask our panel to either pick up on that, or what is the role of the leadership in our society to address those issues, or what is our role to address those issues?
Well, yeah, I would definitely make a comment about that, but I also want to get into what is oftentimes the genesis of a lot of this behavior or mental illness, which is trauma. And so, but you're right. You know, everything that you said is correct. That is the difficulty of breaking out of the cycle. And you know, when you talk about you know, what is the cure? There isn't really a cure. Some people get a lot better, some people don't. And I've heard a lot of clinicians liken it to cancer treatment. Some people get completely better from cancer. Some people go into complete remission. Some people live many, many years with cancer, and some people don't live a long time with it. And it's unfortunate, but you never know who those people are going to be. And so everybody gets the same access to care, because cancer is something that you can see, that's tangible, that's accepted, that there's no stigma around it, unlike mental illness. And so the access to care is one of the most difficult things to get people to get to that managed lifestyle, and it's difficult. I want to hear, because I always like hearing about this, and I'm always fascinated by it. And one of the things that we're now, Reach Out is also an academic study at the jail. We're collecting a number of data points that are important. One of them is adverse childhood experiences. So everybody that's being booked into our jail now is being screened for adverse childhood experiences. And I'm blown away at the number of people with if you're familiar with the study, you know, there's 10, and there's a very strong correlation to behavior and mental health and physical health later on in life based on trauma that occurred when you were a child. And so I'm amazed at the number of people that have 4 or more ACEs. That's what we call them, ACEs, or that's what the study calls them, which puts you at high risk for behavioral health issues or physical, extremely high risk, but particularly in young women that we have in our jail, which is about 25% of the population. So I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about that, because I know that you know, that has adverse childhood experiences, trauma, particularly around sexual abuse, that's a genesis for a lot of this that happens later on.
So what is the specific question? That is complicated, right? I think it is a complicated situation when we really think about childhood trauma, and I think it's kind of like what we talked about for those of you who are here today. The way we view things over time has changed. What was acceptable back then, whatever your definition of back then is, compared to now looks different, right? So if we see somebody beating a kid in Target, we're probably going to be intervening. There's going to be like chaos, right? Where that wasn't always the case before. And a lot of people who are probably in jail were in that, right? Where they're, and nobody's intervening. So it goes back to what I said earlier about not only bystander intervention, that takes on many forms. Are we talking about it? I can't really say anything different than what we've already said, right? Are we talking about these issues? Are we talking about them at home? Are we talking about them with our parents? Those of us that are parents, are we talking about these issues with our kids? I'm horrified because I've been in the field for so long, and I didn't think about, until I started my job that I have now 2 years ago, I didn't even think about talking to my daughter about human trafficking. And now I'm like, what was I thinking? Our conversations have to start at home, they have to start early. We think kids can't handle it, or it's too serious. It's not the case. We need to be talking about it, because if we can talk about it, hopefully we can eliminate it and then take away some of the ACEs, right? And some of that trauma. Because once people have trauma, I love the analogy of the cancer thing, because you're right, some people can recover, some people can't. It looks different with everybody. So I think part of it is going back to that bystander intervention. Is every home going to talk about this? No. Is every home capable of talking about this? No. But there are several of us probably in here who maybe, hopefully, have had that conversation, and then we talk to each other about it as well. It's not just a home thing, it's a community thing, and so it's a conversation that we really need to have. I don't know if that really answers the question, but I think that goes to how we can help eliminate, hopefully someday, eliminate some of the trauma that so many people are experiencing.
Stephanie, while we have you, could you tell us a little bit about, because it's another form of hate, is this sex trafficking, this complete disregard for human life, or human trafficking, not just that. Could you explain it to us a little bit? Tell us what it looks like. Who are the people that are being trafficked? Where do they come from? And who are the people who are doing the trafficking? What's their mindset?
Sure. It can look like anybody. Anybody can be trafficked, and anybody can be a trafficker. I think it goes back to with all these crimes, we have to ask ourselves, what is the picture that we have in our head of what a victim looks like, or what an offender looks like, and we have to throw those out the window because they know no bounds. The exploitation of a person, it's interesting because, again, I started out my career working with victims of domestic abuse and sex abuse, and I think it's all really horrible. But then you get into trafficking, both sex and labor trafficking, and it's like ramped up times 1,000 or 1,000,000, I don't know, a lot. Because we're exploiting people, we're taking advantage of people. You can see in the culture of the offenders where they're just trying to control, manipulate, and dominate, and they'll do anything to keep victims under their control. So I think that's just a whole nother level of definitely of trauma that people experience.
Why do you guys think someone who is being trafficked, why don't they just get out?
Fear.
Fear?
What do you think?
Not that easy.
Yeah, so it's not that easy. Well, what do you think they're scared of exactly?
I mean, they could be killed. They could be shamed for the crime they did. I mean, rape victims are often blamed for their own rape. Just to say these victims can be blamed for it too.
Yeah, those are all really good answers. And then, as we heard here too, fear of being believed. And that is a huge one. I think when we have to consider ourselves, right, family, friends. I mean, we are somebody to everybody. And we have to be prepared to hear these things and to believe them.
And how do we protect ourselves or people we love or younger generations from being vulnerable to this type of exploitation?
That's an interesting question. Are there things we can do to protect ourselves? Maybe. But I am not a big believer in putting the onus on the people being victimized to change that. What we need to do is change the culture of the offenders. We need to not allow that child abuse and target anymore. We need to hold people accountable that can be a part of that process, and that includes the offenders. Victims can do this and do that, dress whatever, it's not going to matter. When an offender has their mindset on doing something, they're going to do it, regardless of what they're wearing or whether they've been drinking. We need to have those conversations, and we need to, as a society, come together and hold those people accountable for their actions.
And then we did touch upon victim blaming, so I'd like to ask you guys what you think about victim blaming, first of all. Is it right? Is it wrong?
It's very wrong.
Yes.
I don't think a victim should be blamed for something that happened to
Or him.
her. Or him.
And
And I think that's a whole nother issue. You know, it's half the time, you know, people do think it is women. And whatever. You know, but a lot of the time, I mean, I'm sure you could back me up as men too, but I can't tell you how many times I've gotten the question, what were you wearing? You know, what does that matter? You know?
No, I think you're right. And when I said earlier, we have a culture issue, I mean, it is definitely, we are hard on women, we don't believe women. I mean, it's not everybody all the time, I'm not trying to generalize, but when we do that to women, and we do it in a big and loud way, what does that do to everybody else in our culture? Whether, no matter how you identify, it makes it even harder for other people to come forward.
what about men in that situation? Because I can imagine it would be very difficult for a man to come forward who's in an abusive, human trafficking or abuse or sex abuse or whatever situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, it's a difficult environment for anybody to come forward, but I think especially when you're not female, don't identify as female, I think it makes it even more difficult.
It's almost like it's not seen as masculine to report. You know, you're not a man if you let somebody do that to you. I feel like that's wrong to think like that because everybody has emotions. You know, just because, you know, some people they don't express it doesn't mean they're not good people. And you also see a lot of times that they report it less because they get made fun of. You know, it's like, oh, you're gay, but you let like something like that happen to you. It's not right.
Well, and I know some men, which is so messed up, that some men have even said, thank you, that men can't get raped.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And that concept I couldn't even fathom. Like, I'm like, what do you mean by that? That doesn't even make sense. Like, how is it women can get raped but men can't? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense.
You know, I don't want to get too deep into the woods here, but when I left my very first job where I worked primarily with victims of domestic abuse, we had a sex abuse case, and it involved 2 construction workers in a hotel. And so one guy raped the other, and so thankfully that person came forward and reported. I mean, not everybody is capable of reporting, and that's the other thing we have to remember. And that's okay, I think everybody has to do it in their own time. But what I saw, interesting what I saw happen with that was the person who reported got so much sympathy, and we felt so sorry for him because he was a family person, he has kids, and I'm like, holy crap. What it made me realize is we have lost all of our empathy for women who are getting abused. So we have lots of problems all over the board with this crime, and I think, you know, being aware of it is super important. Because, I mean, obviously anybody can be raped, and to say otherwise is ignorant.
So why do we victim blame? Why do we do it as humans? And I'm asking the audience. Yeah?
We don't want to believe that people can be that bad. We want to believe that someone else is at fault. So, see, it wasn't really the suspect's fault. It was the other person's fault, too.
So to protect our innocent view of the world?
Yeah, because we don't want to believe someone could have that much evil in them. And we just don't want to believe anybody could be that bad.
That's a good point.
And that we really can't trust just anybody. Anybody off the street could do something to you regardless of what you're wearing, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of what you're saying.
So it feels personally threatening to believe them.
Yeah, it's easier to live the lie that it's the victim's fault, and as long as you're not doing what the victim was doing, then you're going to be okay.
That's a great point. Any other thoughts on that subject? Why do we blame the victim?
I feel like there's this really pervasive narrative that teaches women how not to get raped instead of teaching men not to be rapists. Like, you know, you have to watch your drink, you have to be careful when you go out, you have to carry pepper spray, you always have to be on alert. Instead of teaching other people, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be rapists, maybe we shouldn't hurt people, instead of teaching us always to be on the defense.
So if you miss something on the checklist, well, obviously it's your fault.
Yeah, exactly, and that's not true. It's the fault of someone who wanted to hurt another person and wanted to be that demeaning to another human being.
Great point. So why do we victim blame? Other ideas? Anyone on the panel?
Just an idea. If we can blame somebody else, it relieves us of personal or collective responsibility for making sure it doesn't happen.
That's a very good point too.
Well, yeah, to go off on that, because that's what I was thinking, was like, if you tell, per se, I should just keep on biting. If you tell, per se, like your parent, hey, this happened to me, it's easier for them to blame you than to actually admit that they couldn't protect their child.
So the shame a person would feel about not having been able to protect them, or the action they might have to take in order to protect the person as well. Interesting. Yes?
It's also easier to not take action than it is to take action.
So a lazy approach.
Yeah.
It's your fault, let me go back to watching.
Also a
Breaking
traumatic
Bad.
approach. Because taking action can be traumatic for everybody involved, so sometimes it's protecting yourself
So
as
it can be a
well.
self-protective
Yeah, which
mechanism.
still isn't a very good reason, but understandable all the same.
You can also say the fact that when people are, so when people are accused of rape, the trial itself is very traumatic for someone who is raped because they have to testify over and over and over again. We live those same details over and over again. You're questioned by the defense that makes them look like it's their fault. And they take apart every single story. They take apart every single detail of the story to make it seem like it's the victim's fault, when in reality, why would anybody ask for that?
So they're under a microscope.
Exactly. And like, I don't think a lot of people want to go through that. They don't want to have to relive that trauma over and over and over again. And then sometimes you see that the person's found not guilty. That just makes them feel so much worse. The fact that they had to relive those details and then no one was convicted.
So a feeling of pointlessness. What's the point? I'm not going to get justice. I'm going to be put under a microscope.
I think with that though, part of what we have to ask ourselves is what does healing look like and what does justice look like? Because if we're counting on the criminal justice system to give us that self-satisfaction or justification inside of what happened, we're missing out here, because where do most people learn about this? Is this even working? No. Okay. Is it on? Off? Okay, sorry. I don't know, turn on. Although I will say, I am a firm believer in using microphones. I don't like microphones either, and I know they're a pain in the butt, but we have to remember there are people who have hearing impaired issues, and so we really need to use microphones. So I just thought I'd lecture on that real quick. Yeah, so we can't rely on the criminal justice system, because where do most people learn about this subject? Right, TV, and we don't talk about it. We don't necessarily have facts about it. And then who is our jury? Right, the people who are learning from those sources. And so I feel like we have to, look at our own selves and say, have we done everything we can do? Whether we're a family, friend, a professional, have we done everything that we can possibly do? Have we taken the patience, right, that we talked about already? Have we listened? Have we connected these people with resources? That has to be what we can do, and then with the person, I mean, they might not ever get answers anyway, and even through the criminal justice system. So I think we have to look for other methods of healing with that.
And what do you guys want? So there's a status quo right now, the way things are done, the way people judge, the way we might be lazy in our approach or fearful in our approach. So where should we go? Like in the next 10 years, what should the culture look like? How do we combat fear? How do we allow victims to come forward without judgment? What does that look like, and is that something you guys want? So older generation, younger generation, yeah.
It has to start with number one. It has to start with you, with us. Getting involved with committees like this, just becoming aware and sharing what we know with other people that we know. And it just has to start with number one.
That's a great point. Start with what you can change. Yeah, beside you.
I have a roommate that is on the side of you can't change the world, so don't try because you're going to put yourself in danger doing it. But I keep trying to tell her, nothing ever got done by sitting on your butt and doing nothing. If you want change to happen, you have to go out there and make it happen. You're putting yourself at risk, but you have to do it if you want to see change. Otherwise, you're not going to see it, and the world is going to go by without you, and you're not going to see the change anymore.
It seems so implausible, but where change happens is in rooms like this one, is in small committees, is in the one-on-one conversations that creates the ripple effect. It's an amazing thing to witness, but when you do become members of committees and groups and nonprofits, like there's a few members of the National Center for the Prevention of Community Violence here today, that's just a group of people in different parts of the country on the phone talking to each other about what can we do. It's not a mysterious billion people all got together and decided we're going to make change. No, it's always small groups. So don't underestimate the power that you guys here each have today and the great enlightening points that you're all bringing up of things I hadn't thought of before. Yes.
I've got to admit, it is embarrassing sometimes to open your mouth and say what's in your heart, say what's on your mind to somebody else, because you don't know what they're going to say back at you. But you've got to just do it and just keep on going to the next person. You know, I mean, you just don't bring it up in conversation, but when it does arise, you know, it's difficult to step out, but it's got to be done, you know. That's the only way it goes forward.
The funny thing is we actually reward people in society for being brave and speaking their mind and being individuals, and yet we're all so scared to do it. Yeah.
I also wanted to mention that I think media is an extremely powerful tool when it comes to change. Media can get society to do huge things just by the power of suggestion. So if media can start pushing progress, then we might see more progress in society. And not just media aimed at adults, but media aimed at children as well.
That's a great point. Does anyone on the panel want to talk about media and the current climate and how to navigate that?
It's a difficult question, and it's a difficult lift because, again, one of the things I talked about earlier when I mentioned the narrative, I'll give you an example when it comes from the world of policing. There was a situation, basically, down in Florida where a young man was accosted by a neighborhood watch person. And that neighborhood watch person, you know, started talking to this young man, and all of a sudden, it turned into an incident. And so they started screaming and hollering, and there was an altercation going on, and all of a sudden, it was like, you know, the police department, the gentleman called the police department, it was the neighborhood watch person, and said, I've got this guy, I think he's stolen something, I've got him, and the first thing the dispatcher said was, the police department is on its way, you don't need to do that, just stand by, the police department is coming, it'll be there to take care of the situation. This guy demanded a response, he was assured that there was going to be a response coming from law enforcement. And lo and behold, the man continued to press the issue and eventually ended up shooting the young man, killing him. The young man was totally unarmed, and that young man is by the name of Trayvon Martin. But when you listen to the list of police shootings in America, do you realize Trayvon Martin is listed as one? When the police department actually said, stand down, don't do that, the police are on their way. But the narrative didn't fit. It didn't fit because it was a dialogue that was, you know, I guess, blaming the system itself. And one of the things that we have to do in our narrative as a nation is we have to speak the truth. The truth sometimes hurts. But what we find sometimes in the media is that there is a wide paintbrush on certain parts of our society. And I tell people all the time, I'm a person who, because my background, like a lot of these people, is in policing. And there are a whole lot more good things happening in policing than bad things. But if you listen to the media, you don't really pick that up, do you? It's all about, well, you know, our police officers, there's a big problem in policing today in America. There's a big problem in a lot of places in America. But I tell people as I travel the country, pay attention to the narrative. We want the truth to come out. And so it's time sometimes that we need to question the media's aspect of what the truth is. I'll say one more thing about this, and it's really critically important. I had a role in the police department. I was the public information officer for the police department. And what that means is I was the guy that had to deal with the media all the time, which became very interesting. And so every time we had a homicide or we had something going in the department, I was the person that was always in the paper. Bobby Kipper said this, Bobby Kipper said that. And I sort of got tired of seeing my own name because there were a lot of homicides in our city and I always had to report them. I went to a media meeting where the media and police meet and they talk about our differences and how to come together and really do fair and honest, balanced reporting. And there was a gentleman that stood up that was retiring, and he was the editor of a regional newspaper in Virginia called the Virginia Pilot. And he basically said, this is my last meeting as the editor of the Virginia Pilot. I've been with the Pilot 47 years, and I've been the editor of the newspaper for the last 12. And he said, one thing that we don't understand is you think that the media is just made to state the facts. But he said, let's realize something today. When I first came into journalism, the role of the media was to state the facts. As I'm leaving journalism and I'm going into retirement, the role of today's media is to question public policy. And if that does in itself have a narrative that may not be straightforward, we still question public policy. Sensationalism in America sells. Even if it's not the truth, it still sells.
I'm glad you brought up the media. So how do we navigate a world in which we need the media for information and yet there's a lot of disinformation and it's very easy to get into this echo bubble, echo chamber of our own thoughts being repeated back at us. I'm sure you guys get media courses, you're media savvy. What do you do? How do you get news that's actually news and not just sensationalist and not just things that are supporting your own views because you just want to see your views echoed back at you?
You do research, you take everything with a grain of salt.
Research, absolutely. Take things with a grain of salt. How do you research?
I mean, you could do something as simple as just like watching, wow, you're really good at your steps today. You could do something as simple as just like watching the news every night, or like even on Facebook, you know, everybody, you know, I mean, God, most of us have like so many thousand or 100 friends, you know, like they all share stuff and you know, anything like that. Just, I mean, social media has everything now. You know, I feel like you don't even have to look for it at this point. Like I can, you know, go on Facebook right now and probably pull up 3 videos in a matter of 5 minutes, you know?
And how do you deal with the videos that are being sent to you being curated for you? In the sense that whatever you believe, you're just going to get more of it. So that's going to strengthen your worldview. You get more of those videos. It's just a kind of a hamster wheel of your own thoughts being echoed back at you. How do you step outside of that? If you're relying on internet news or what's being sent to you or what comes up easily in your feed or your friend's feed?
Well, when I say really inspirational things, well, that I find inspirational or something like that, that are related, you know, to like sexual violence or dating violence especially or anything like that, I really like to have intellectual conversations with others. Those are my favorite kinds of conversations. So, I don't know, I just talk to other people, see what their thoughts are, what their views are, and if I'm interested in what they have to say, then I'll look it up.
I'm glad you brought that up. Go ahead.
One of the things I wanted to comment on tonight was really impressive is I haven't seen any of you using this. You're all here, present, in a community,
Oh my goodness.
talking about what's important to us. So put this away because one of the problems with this device that fits in my back pocket is it can connect me to people all around the world who think exactly like I do. And what's the danger in that? If it's inspirational, I think it's good. If it's, things that are uplifting. But there are people who are hanging out with people just like them on corners of the web and the internet and Facebook, who are trading some really vile stuff. And the idea that we can go into a bubble and it becomes self-reinforcing, and all of a sudden, anyone who isn't like us is demonized. They become the other, and that's when tragedy is born. The idea that you can, again, find your echo bubble. And I used to be I used to use Twitter a lot. And I'd go there just to check things out and follow the people I like. And by the time I was done checking Twitter, I was angry. And I was like, I'm gonna unfollow that person, and I don't like that person. And what I realized was this device, this technology, it's not media, but it's a technology, is designed to create anger and discord and unhappiness. And it rewards short, pithy, county coup on people and making snappy comebacks. And I think it's a big part of what's driven us apart into our own groups and smaller and smaller communities. And one of the things I was thinking about here is how many of us are liberal, how many of us are conservative, how many of us are Trump supporters, how many of us are not, how many of us are afraid to find out that about the other person because we would feel really badly to find out that someone we like, has a view different from ours. And it's shutting down conversation instead of creating it. And again, thank you all for participating tonight without constantly checking your messages and your feeds.
I think one thing that it's really interesting, because this is a subject that's obviously you can tell is really near and dear to me. As an author and a writer, I get asked to go on to certain media outlets and get interviewed. I've been interviewed by MSNBC. I've been interviewed by Fox News New York. I've been interviewed by Public Broadcasting, C-SPAN. And what you have to do when you get your information from the media is you have to do the same thing that we have to do when we go talk to the media. So when I get interviewed by one source of media, I know that there's a certain agenda for that source of media. When I go talk to another source of the media, I know they're going to shift it to another agenda for them. Why do we have CNN and a Fox News? Because when they report on the same issue, they report it on their narrative. And those narratives are different between Fox and CNN. And if you go to MSNBC, you're going to get closer to CNN. And it's when you're in our position and when you're interviewed, it becomes a maze of an issue. I was interviewed on MSNBC after the shooting at Parkland. And one of the questions to me was, all of a sudden about, guns. And that's a whole dynamite subject when you talk about weapons and Second Amendment. And it was really interesting when I got on to the interview, the first thing that the woman said to me, she said, the president has advocated for teachers in America to be armed in schools. And I should have saw that coming, because it wasn't the fact that reporter wanted to know about my view on weapons possession. It turned into they wanted to know my view on what the president has said. So you see how it's you can go with the idea that you're going to be helping the world, improving society, and giving people the best knowledge-based learning that they can get to make the world a better place, to let's see if we can pull you to our agenda. It's the same thing happens on both sides. I've seen it happen, again, narrative, narrative, narrative. You cannot escape it. That's who it is.
We had a young lady in the back who wants to make a comment.
I just wanted to clarify that by media, I didn't mean just like news or social media, but also fiction. I've seen fiction inspire so much within society. It's honestly amazing. And if we can get more diversity and accuracy when it comes to race, mental illness, LGBT representation, all of that. If we can get more of that into even fictional media, I think it might inspire less hate and more acceptance.
That's a great point.
Bobby talked about the need to tell the truth. I was a college student very young, so I won't embarrass anybody by asking who's getting credit to be here tonight from classes. See, but they're so eager to be forthcoming and honest. That's okay. That's okay. We love to have you anyways. My experience, and I have to deal with the media all the time, we do, and you have to consider the source. Whatever you read or you see on TV or whatever, there's always an angle to it, and there's always another side, no matter how thin you slice it. And the facts are rarely as they're presented. And the media today is a business. It's supposed to be a public service, but it's a business. It's a race to get out the story as quickly as possible. It's a race to get out the most salacious or gripping headlines, and it's a race to get their viewership as high as possible to sell ads to the subscribers so that they can make money. And that's how it works. And so, whatever story, and I can tell you my own experience, I have tons of them, but I'll give you one example. 2010, we had two 2-year-old boys go missing 2 weeks apart. Both of them were found dead after extensive searches. It was listed back then, 2010, as the #1 news story by the Arizona Republic. And it happened out at the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. One was over in Verde, one was down in Dewey. So one was actually accidentally killed by his mother, his stepmother, and because she gave him an overdose of some medication, and then she disposed of the body, and we found him a couple weeks later. The other one wandered off from the house, walked at 2 years old, walked a couple miles out into the brush, found a big water hole, waded out there, died. Got drowned and died. The media, the national media, Nancy Grace was here. Everybody, they're set up. They so desperately wanted this to be a child murderer, a serial child murderer, that they would say anything, they would do it anything, they grasped every single piece of information they could possibly get to make this link together, whether it actually did or not. Because they got everybody looking at their site, they got everybody looking at their whatever it was that they're doing. Everybody tuning in at 6 o'clock. And that's all that they needed. They didn't need it to be the truth. And by the way, it wasn't the truth. One was a horrible accident. One was, it was an accident, but it was negligent on behalf of the mother. But they were in no way ever related. And there was mountains of evidence that proved that. They still did not care. So, in that particular situation, they reported, yes, the kids were missing. Yes, they died. Yes, this is who they were. Yes, this is where they were at. But then when they started getting beyond that, it just wasn't accurate. And so, that's my advice to everybody, is that when you see something, and if you be suspicious of it. If there's another source, get multiple sources. Like it was said, come to the community meeting. If it's something that was said in your city council meeting, go online and read the minutes from the dang thing, whatever. It's just that don't let yourself succumb to that, because that will breed anger, that will breed hate.
Wow, that's powerful. That the media, and we know this, but it's so easy to get seduced, wants our attention so desperately that they will give us whatever they can to get it. Yes, in the back.
I'm backtracking a little bit to something she said about the ideas of representations in works of fiction, because those tend to be most influential on the younger generation. I think we have made some tremendous strides in representation of people of different ethnicities as far as outrage of making sure that from the Aladdin movie being cast correctly and then representation of LGBT. But I think we've grown much further into a slippery slope on the presentation of mental illness in media, because we have things where it is being sensationalized to a point where it's not something that is scaring people away, but rather luring them into it. Like with 13 Reasons Why, when the show first aired, not even a couple months later, there was a girl who had copycatted the story of how that girl had killed herself and used that as an inspiration to do it to herself. Or in American Horror Story, where they had a school shooter, but they made it this gorgeous young actor who was romantic and built, and everybody was in love with him. And we've taken mental illness and twisted it into this sexual, sensualized thing that made people want it, rather than presenting it as something that is a genuine struggle or issue. And I think it becomes another issue in media with a similar concept to the misrepresenting with media and how it affects our society.
That's a good point. I remember when I was growing up, Heather Locklear, I don't know if any of you know her, she's a hottie of her day. She is beautiful, blonde, and played an bulimic anorexic woman, and spawned many friends of mine to become bulimic. So it is a good point that in Hollywood, we need to be aware of what we're consuming and how we're representing certain things. Would you say that's fair? Would you guys say that's fair?
Yes.
Yeah, in the back there.
I would also just say that that's another reason why a lot of people are so scared to come out about these kind of things, is because other people are glorifying them and making people who these horrible things are actually happening to. It's making them scared to come out about it because they don't want to be called a fake, they don't want to be made fun of, they don't want to seem like all of those other people who are just doing this kind of stuff for more attention and because they think it's cool.
Could you elaborate on that?
So kind of like how with 13 Reasons Why, people are mirroring how this girl killed herself, and they're glorifying it because in their mind, they think that's how they should get attention. They think that's cool. So for people who are actually suicidal and who are considering those kind of drastic options, they're kind of scared to talk to other people about it because other people are doing it just for attention, and they don't want to seem like they're doing it for attention even though they're actually struggling, so they just rather keep quiet about it.
And then we don't know until it's too late that, oh, it actually wasn't for attention. So what do we do? How do we address that? Yeah.
Part of the problem, I think, is misrepresentation. Representation doesn't always mean that it's done well. I mean, just look at gay representation in media. It hasn't been done well in a long time, and we're only now progressing on that front.
What kind of representation in media?
LGBT representation. But if you have bad representation, then people are going to have negative connotations with what you're representing. For example, if you have gay characters in your story and all of them are murderous villains, people are going to villainize gay people eventually. And that's the same thing with mental illness here. Mental illness is being sensationalized as either something really cool or something really dangerous. And it's not being represented accurately. And that's the main problem, is that it's not being represented accurately, and it's not being represented by people who actually know what's going on with these illnesses.
It's so tricky. I actually have played a black lesbian character, and the producers at the time were worried, can she be black and lesbian? And I was worried, I don't want to play a black, I just am black and I can just be lesbian. I'm not going to play it, so I just played it real, like just a real normal person. But it is so tricky because I think some people maybe don't care about that. They'll just play a character, or the producers will have people play a character and not care. And others care deeply, and maybe we'll get it wrong because of ignorance, a lack of understanding about those cultures. So what's the solution? What is the solution to that?
I'm not exactly sure what the solution would be specifically for that, but I think something that's really important is the way we start bringing up our children in the future. Because we've talked about a lot of the things about the way the world is right now. And we've talked about, oh, we can change ourselves. Change is a hard thing. You are the way you are because of the way you grew up and your life experiences. And a lot of the reasons why you have your perceptions and your different stereotypes are because of that hurt and the fear. You know, it's coming from somewhere. But the main thing is when you start to react or you have these certain opinions, to realize what's triggered it. And instead of just reacting, that you can actually pause for a minute and really feel what's going on inside you and see if you can figure out where that came from to begin with. Because the only way to really change is to find the root cause of the pattern. Not
That's
looking forward,
crucial.
but it's really looking in a very specific way.
And stopping and recognizing that you could have a reaction to something. What is that? What am I feeling? What am I thinking? Is that what you're saying?
The why. Like, whoa, I just reacted instead of no reflection. We're taught to just go, go, go and be so impulsive. And in our culture, I don't feel like peaceful time or reflective time, even creative art time is really prioritized in our world. And I think all of that really goes in together and really enriches community.
So part of that go, go, go community means that we can't even stop and take a second and absorb what's going on inside ourselves.
Another really important thing is we live in a world that seems to be really competitive instead of compassionate, cooperative. And we really need to start changing the narratives that go along with those different lifestyles. We as a whole culture, in multi-levels, I won't talk about them all, but I think that we all feel like it is a competitive culture that we live in. And that right there doesn't breed tolerance, it doesn't breed acceptance or compassion. It's me over you.
And what are people competing for?
I guess there would be a lot of different things. Acceptance would be the main thing, or to be popular, just different things that our world has kind of taught us to look as that you're something if X, Y, and Z. Like whatever that is, because there's so many different facets of it. The other thing that I find is a really big challenge, I've been an educator, I was really big on peace, and led a lot of stuff on Martin Luther King Day here with the kids. And motivation in school systems and just in the world is so instant gratification. We're looking for these external forces all the time to motivate us instead of intrinsic. And that is super paramount to going in that other way. Cooperation versus the competition and all of that.
When we have these devices that give us a little hit of dopamine every time we see a like or hit or just find a new page or something, we actually lose the ability within ourselves we lose motivation within ourselves because we don't need it. We're getting that hit of dopamine constantly, and so it's at a cost. Yep, behind you.
That's why I mentioned specifically putting diversity and representation in children's media, because if you can get children to learn and use acceptance of themselves and of other people, regardless of gender identity, race, sexuality, what have you, then they are more likely to carry that acceptance and that belief throughout the rest of their lives. Because change when you're an adult is a lot harder. I grew up in a very homophobic and transphobic family due to religious reasons. And as a result, it kind of stunted my own personal growth and caused me to be homophobic and transphobic. And it took a while, but eventually I was able to not only accept my own sexuality, but to accept the sexuality of others as well. But it took a long time. And media didn't help. Media just encouraged this view of, heterosexuality, cisgender, white people, men are the strong ones, women are the weak ones, that kind of thing. And that was emotionally stunting to me. I suffer from depression and anxiety now because of it, because I suppressed so much as a kid. And it was media that helped me become more open with it. It was media that allowed me to come out to myself and eventually out to my mother and my friends.
Wow.
So media is a very powerful tool. And if we could target this kind of media towards kids to teach them acceptance of mental illnesses and races and the LGBT community, then I think we will have a lot of progress right there.
So it sounds like that kind of media, positive media, helped you deprogram.
Yeah, it did. I was able to finally accept that I was gay, which my family did not approve of and told me as such when I was just a little kid, so I suppressed it most of my life. But media finally allowed me to come out to myself and others.
Thank you for sharing that. I can not even imagine how difficult that is. We are close to the end of our time, so I'm going to ask the panel if there's anything we didn't touch on, last remarks you want to say, and to just jump in. Or someone get nominated, either one.
Well, I want to say that the vast majority of people in this audience, I think 99% are my students. I'm not kidding, I seriously am not. And I'm so proud to sit here as your professor and listen to what you have to say. And one of the things that I love about teaching is when my students teach me, and I feel like that's happened tonight. This was a really eye-opening and thought-provoking evening. It was much more valuable than I ever could dream it would be. And so I want to thank you guys for coming and, totally get your extra credit. But I truly hope, though, that you did still find this to be a valuable experience. And I really do sincerely thank you guys for coming and for participating. So thank you very much.
Anyone else?
I'll just say one thing. We obviously have talked about a lot of serious subjects tonight, and I can tell that it is impacting some of you. So if we could just practice that bystander intervention and check on one another. And if anybody needs help, we are all here to talk. So please make sure that we're taking those steps starting today.
The one thing I would say is that Patricia said it earlier, get involved in the causes that really you're passionate about. That's incredibly important. The world is basically open for you to have a voice, and your voice is important. Some of us are seeing sort of light on the horizon as we're going to move on to another phase of our life. And it would do me nothing but just, great pride, as your professor said, to really know that we're going to be in great hands of change because you have raised your voice and you have gone for a cause that you totally believe in. It makes life so worthwhile to do that. I challenge each of you to examine yourself for that. It's very important.
In a way, you all are really fortunate. When I was your age, back at the University of North Dakota in the 1970s, a conversation like this would be just about unimaginable. And here, you all joined us tonight, shared, and disclosed things that weren't even talked about. They were taboo subjects 40 years ago. And we're all working on it together. And someday, when you're 60 and you're sitting on a panel, you're going to be looking out at 20-somethings college students and saying the same thing to them. Just imagine how much more change there could be over your lifetimes and over your careers.
Thank you for that positive spin, Mike. Ty, did you want to say any last thing?
I'm not 60 yet. I am on the panel. No, just thank you guys for coming out. It was a late night, but we really appreciate you guys coming out and having a discussion with us, so thank you very much.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be out here. The panel will be gathering after this and awarding extra credit based on participation. So, I'm just kidding. Had a great time. Thanks for sticking with us.
So I don't have time to tell you this story, but I did want to share with you on the subject of compassion being an antidote for hate. There's an a guy who almost became an active shooter. He has a talk on TED Talks. And he had nothing going for him in his life. He, at some point, he was going to commit suicide. His mother said, "Oh, next time I'll give you razor blades, you can finish the job." Things like that. Anyway, so he decided he was going to become an active shooter. He got the gun, he got everything. He had nobody in his life. He had shunned everybody. He was as bad as he could be to everyone because that's how he felt inside. One person showed him compassion and said, hey, do you want to go do something? Let's watch a movie. His entire being changed from that one incident, and instead of shooting people, he didn't even care who, because he said when you have nothing to live for, you can do anything. So instead of shooting people, he realized he still had one friend. Everything changed, and he said, look for people in life who you think deserve love the least, because they're the ones who need it the most. Now he is a family man with 3 kids. His friend, his only friend at the time, who he had treated horribly and stolen from, is still his friend to this day. He's never shot anyone. He's a great member of society. So people can change with compassion. Even very darkly placed people can change. So just think about that the next time you see someone you don't understand, who you feel doesn't deserve any of your time, compassion, energy. I mean, you might save the world just by reaching out.
Very good. Well, thank you guys so much.
I'll just say thank you and I'll sign off. Thank you so much for your attention tonight, guys. You were, I will echo the statements of your art history teacher that you guys gave so much. I learned a lot. I think maybe everyone on the panel learned a lot. And it's important for us to hear your voices because we're of one generation. We can't just preach to you. We really need that interaction. So thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Okay, just in closing, Patricia McKenzie, award-winning actress, she is available if anybody would like to come up and get a photo with her. She'll certainly make herself available for that. The panel had already indicated that they'll be up here in the front if anybody wants to come down for a conversation. Bobby Kipper has authored a book called No Bullies. They are for sale in the back. There's some great strategies in there about how do we intervene in a bullying situation that supports the victim of bullying, but also may help the bully change their behavior. So it's a great read. I encourage you, if you're interested in further discussion on that, please take a look at those. And I think, we'll just call it a night. Please, if you are a student for extra credit, make sure you did get your signature on that roster in the back. And with that, thank you all for being here. We did have some sponsors that we probably ought to acknowledge. State Farm Insurance, thank you. Walmart, the Gail Gardner Walmart, they contributed a significant financial contribution. None of the speakers here came for money. None of them. Well, they're all here because they love this community, and we're very fortunate to have a celebrity like Patricia, who has adopted Yavapai County now, and I think we'll see you probably many more times. Rocky Mountain Information Network and the 100 Club of Arizona also stepped up and sponsored not only the training conference, but this event tonight. So thank you for our sponsors.